believe that in this case, what Mr. Johnson was really asking for was a ruling on the merits. He was asking for the court to stop the election, not preserve the status quo, which would be to allow the election to go forward because that was already in motion. So I would submit that this is not the classic case of a preliminary injunction denial affecting only temporary or intermediate action, but in fact would have been a ruling on the merits. And that although Mr. Johnson characterized it as a preliminary injunction, that just as in the companion case, it was really a ruling on the merits, and therefore the appeal from that denial, in essence, is an appeal on the merits of the case, and therefore it does stay in jurisdiction.
Then the other point I wanted you to address briefly is the California Supreme Court in Wright made some orders and rulings relating to 11362.77, sort of with the implicit assumption that it was effective as law. And how does that, the fact that that happened, enter into your reasoning opposing this motion?
Well, in looking at, I always go back to auto equity sales, which in essence gives the trial court, as I read it, some discretion about how the court looks at what apparently could be conflicting appellate authority. On the one hand, you have an appellate decision which clearly does say the .77 statute violates the
Compassionate Use Act.
Compassionate Use Act. And on the other hand, you have Wright, which, at least again, I think that the Kelly case seemed to kind of skip over these issues. It didn't look at the question of whether subdivision B of 11362.77 is a savings clause, in fact, because although it's, as the Supreme Court said, it's phrased in mandatory language, but it does have this language in there that says that notwithstanding in effect what subdivision A says, the patient is still entitled to possess whatever amounts are necessary for the patient's needs, and therefore the patient can have more than the minimum limits if the patient, in fact, has a medical recommendation that would support that. The Kelly case seems to simply ignore that, and I think the Supreme Court, although it was not the issue before, it certainly indicated that it found that saved any potential conflict between 215 and the medical marijuana program. So I would submit that, at least for the purposes of deciding whether 4 days before the election this court needs to take action right away, that the potential conflict between Wright and Kelly certainly gives this court some discretion to say that if there is a problem with Measure B, that can be done after the election, that the court does not need to rule precipitously today, and that, in fact, the court has discretion to decline to take any action but to wait until after the election. There'll certainly be plenty of time for further briefing and for consideration of these things in light of knowing what People versus Kelly's ultimate fate is.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, anything just in response to what Mr. Zotter said?
Certainly. Post-election consideration of these issues in the environment of Measure B having passed and being implemented would be chaotic and wasteful in the extreme. Can Your Honor envision prosecution such as this going forward with defense attorneys lining up not only to defend their clients based on the Kelly decision, but to undo previous convictions on appeal if Measure B was in effect and implemented? And as I have pointed out, this is a window of opportunity for Your Honor to take control of this case back now that we are in a hiatus in between the appeals court denying my petition for an injunction and my request for reconsideration and judicial notice based on the Kelly decision, where these same arguments are going to be made by me to the appeals court, and you're going to be my adversary here. Or you can decide to simply step back, take a deep breath, and decide that in order to preserve the status quo pending trial, during which time the Kelly decision will still be the law of the land, to seal the ballots in order for the electorate to take a deep breath, the courts to regroup, and a calm decision be made at a trial where who knows whether you and I will be at it, but a trial on Measure B's constitutionality and legality where Measure B is not in effect. I believe that is a great social good that you are in a position to approve. And I agree with Council Daughter on one point. You have discretion here. This is something I would not presume to say you are mandated to do, but something that I think I have argued compellingly that you have the opportunity to do, and it's in the public interest. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Zotter. As both of you know, I issued a lengthy written ruling on April 23rd after hearing not only multiple arguments in this case, also the Laguna versus Hanamoto case, and the previous case that dealt with the Ripple initiative. So I've thoroughly researched these issues. I'm not your adversary, Mr. Johnson. I make the calls as I see them. I made the best call I could under the facts as I understood them to be in applicable law on April 23rd. And you've appealed that decision, which is fine. And I'm not a party in the appellate court. The appellate court reviews certainly decisions of the lower court and makes decisions about them. But someone else will be there advocating, not me, and I'm always ready to be educated, and my understanding